Good morning, everybody. It is Man Coverage. This is Knoxville Nate and JB James Bonneville here. Week 7 college football. It is October 16th, 2022. JB, how you doing today, buddy?
It better be a crime.
I like to hear that. Wow. I got to be honest. I think this was one of the best weeks we've had thus far in the 2022 college football season. Week 7. We had a lot of pretty good matchups. I was doing my pick 'em before the week, and I was like, holy crap, I have no idea who to pick on any of these games, and tried to help out a friend of mine, and I think I screwed her pick 'em all up. I was like, here, pick these ones, because she wasn't sure on which to get way to go. So Susan, I'm sorry if you're watching. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to tell you. I wasn't trying to screw your pick'em league up. I thought that I knew who these winners were, and I got to admit, man, I was wrong. And let's be honest, Vegas was wrong, because Vegas had the Alabama Crimson Tide. At one point, it was 8.5. I think it got down to as low as 7, but they were at least a touchdown favorite over the hometown Knoxville, Tennessee Volunteers. And let's just be honest, it did not go as planned for Nick Saban. The Volunteers of Tennessee have played the Alabama Crimson Tide every year since 1928. They were uninterrupted except for one time in that entire history. I believe it was World War II kind of stepped in and canceled the game once. But other than that, the third Saturday in October has always been Alabama and Tennessee. For a while, Tennessee rolled, and then for the last 15 years, it's been Nick Saban. He's 15-0, or was 15-0 against the Volunteers. And then last night, we had a change of reality for old Nick. I don't know. Let's just play it.
From 40, on the way, a knuckleball. He got it. And here they come.
He's got his own security team there helping old Nicky off the field. And let's be honest, that kicker, McGrath, you got to give him some credit. This guy missed an extra point earlier in the game. Now they ended up going for 2 later on and erased that 1 point deficit, which was following him around after the missed extra point. But he redeemed himself, and that kick didn't look pretty, but as he said in the post-game interview, it sailed through the uprights and went in, and he said 3 points is 3 points, and he was damn right. There's a lot to unpack with this game. Neither defense, honestly, played really good. Tennessee did have some big plays. Alabama had some big plays, too, on defense. A couple of interception, a scoop and score for a touchdown, a couple of behind-the-line plays. But honestly, this was an offensive shootout. That was, something that we both kind of predicted, in the sense that we thought that each team would score some points. I did not think that they would allow Jalen Hyatt to get behind them 5 times for touchdowns. Now, Nick Saban has been one of the greatest coaches, is the greatest coach, in my opinion, of all time. Was a defensive back. He's been a genius on defense. James, I got to ask you, first off, what the hell was going on with their defense? How did they let Jalen Hyatt get behind them 5 times for long touchdown passes?
Honestly, when I kept watching this game, there were multiple times where I would watch. They knew where the ball was coming, and they would get confused in who was going to pick up whom. I mean, they had 3-on-2, and they would still allow Hyatt. The coverage would get busted, and Hyatt would just blow by him. And it was constant. I mean, and they were always down the seam. I mean, it was constantly on the hash marks. And they look confused all the time. And I mean, heck, the one thing I will give Hendon Hooker credit with his receivers is there is definitely a sync up between those guys. There was a play, like even when he throws short, the receivers always know what's going on. Remember when there was that pass interference in the second half on Malachi Moore, where there's a short ball clanked off Malachi Moore's hands, went into Kool-Aid McKinstry's hands, and he goes down the field for 80 and then steps out of bounds where it was a pass interference?
Yep.
I mean, you could tell that Fant was right there. He knew it was going to be short. And when it's short like that, those D-backs, I mean, those corners are screwed. It's either they block it out for they get a pass interference, or pray to God it doesn't get caught. And I've never seen Alabama's D-backs look that confused throughout a game. I mean, Hendon Hooker, I mean, as much as we promote CJ Stroud on this show, right now, I got to say Hendon Hooker's got to be the leading candidate right now for the Heisman, because he looked amazing last night.
No, he's right there. He's definitely right there. I mean, is Hendon Hooker better than CJ Stroud? I don't know, but he's definitely getting it done. And I think we can all attest it's the system that he's in, right? I mean, the system that he's in fits his game perfectly. I mean, this is what, this is it's a perfect system for Hendon Hooker to be in. It fits his skill set magically. I go back to Justin Fuentes at Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
And just think of what could have been if they had just put the right, offense around him. It's kind of like and I hate to use this example because we're not really an NFL show, but I watched the Chicago Bears on Thursday night, and I watched Justin Fields out there. Oh God, it was horrible. It was hard to watch.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why I watched the whole game, but I did. And I was just sitting there thinking the whole time, like this offense is just ridiculous for them to be running Justin Fields out there. It doesn't suit his skill set at all. They don't use barely any of the read option stuff, the stuff that he ran in college. I mean, they're trying to fit a circle in a square hole, and it's not going to work. And you'll see flashes of Justin Fields, and that's what I've heard people say is like, oh, you see flashes. Well, yeah, because every once in a while his talent takes over and shows, what he can do, but the coaches are doing him no help. I thought once they got rid of Matt Nagy that maybe he would have a chance, but it just seems like it's gotten worse. And
he
that's
can't
kind of
throw
what
to himself. I mean, you have to have a receiver. He cannot throw to himself.
Well, yeah, he's got no help. But that's what I'm talking about with Hooker at Virginia Tech. I mean, it wasn't a good fit for him, and what a great decision by him to come to Tennessee and to play for Josh Heupel. And I think we need to talk for a minute about Josh Heupel. I mean, think about what he inherited. Taking over for Jeremy Pruitt. The school was in trouble, getting in trouble for Jeremy Pruitt's pregnant wife passing out McDonald's bags full of cash to players that didn't even produce on the field. They won 3 games the previous season before Heupel took over. Obviously, last year, everybody knew that they overachieved and, did a lot of stuff that they didn't have any business doing, but they really couldn't stop anybody on defense. And at times, the offense wasn't perfect, and, they overachieved last year. Well, overachieve is not even a word I can use for what they've done this year. Taking down Alabama at home. I was there last night in the stands on the 50-yard line and got to soak all that in. That was the first time I've seen that stadium like that, where the fans really believed that they could beat Alabama and, went nuts like that. That's the first time I can remember anything like that since 2001. Casey Clausen was the quarterback. He's been a high school coach for like 20 years. So that was some time ago. And wow, it was just amazing. I have to give credit to Coach Heupel. This team believes they can win. That's the first thing you have to do, is you have to get these guys to believe that they can win. And they believe it. They believe they could win from the first minute. They went out and scored on their first possession. Alabama had the ball almost the entire game. At one point, I looked up at the time of possession clock, and it was 34 minutes to 17 minutes. So they had doubled the amount of time, and I'm just like, man, that defense has to be gassed out there. And they were, but they were rotating guys throughout the game. They played at least 5 linebackers. They played at least, I believe, 9 defensive linemen. They were really shorthanded in the secondary. There was an injury at corner, and then obviously Jalen McCullough did not play after his suspension. So this was a shorthanded defense who was on the field almost the entire game. Now, they didn't get a ton of stops, but they did get a couple sacks, and they did make some plays when they had to. But this game was all about offense and giving, who was going to get the ball last. Bama got the ball. They missed a field goal. Tennessee got the ball, I believe. How much time was left when Tennessee got the ball there at the end?
Very little, like maybe under 30 seconds.
Yeah, that was 34 seconds, 36 seconds. I can't remember, but they did have the 2 timeouts, which was huge. So you got to give Coach Heupel a lot of credit for the way that he, managed the clock at the end of the game. A lot of people thought they were going to put Joe Milton in and throw a, long Hail Mary pass like they did, at the end of the first half. But they didn't. They were going for the field goal, which was smart, which is what I thought they should do. They threw a quick slant in to Keaton, or a flag route in the middle of the field to Keaton. They called the timeout, and then obviously ran the last play, which got them in position for the field goal. They called a timeout. The clock in the stadium had run to 0. So a lot of people thought that regulation was over, but I was like, no, Heupel was all over it. He was right on the ref. He called the timeout.
Not only that, Brew McCoy did too as well. You saw Brew McCoy on the field, and the ref caught it right away.
Yeah, they did. I mean, they had it. I thought they may have had 2, but they put 1 second back on the clock and let him kick the field goal. What did you think about what Coach Heupel has done so far, James? And what did you think about the way he managed this game down the stretch?
I mean, honestly, I've always liked Josh Heupel, but this guy is, throughout his entire life, has always been somebody's second or third choice. I mean, you go back to when he was coming up out of South Dakota in high school. He was getting recruited by Wisconsin and Minnesota and Wyoming, Houston, but he was never the first choice or second choice. He was like the third guy they wanted. He ends up going to Weber State, gets sick of it, transfers to Snow Junior College, and then ends up at Oklahoma during a rebuild with Bob Stoops, and in year 2 wins a national championship. I mean, then you look at his coaching career. I mean, heck, he was a great quarterbacks coach at Oklahoma. When he finally becomes the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma, he gets fired after a 40-6 loss in the bowl game to Clemson.
Yeah.
Works his way back up at Utah State, Missouri as an offensive coordinator, and then becomes the head coach at UCF after Scott Frost had his brilliant 2 years there. He got overshadowed no matter how good he did, because the years before they were undefeated. And he gets the job at Tennessee, where he wasn't the first choice. He wasn't the second choice, but doggone it, he was the right choice. And look what he's done there in 2 years without Cedric Tillman at receiver. I mean, could you imagine if you had McCoy, Tillman, and Hyatt yesterday? And heck, I remember in our preview show before the year, we were talking about Jalen Hyatt. I'm like, you yourself are like, guy's got a lot of potential, but you just don't know what you're going to get from game to game.
Yeah. Well, he has had at times he's disappeared.
Yeah.
And he did not disappear last night, except for he disappeared behind that Bama secondary.
Oh, my God.
As I mentioned in the opening, I just couldn't understand how they continued to let him run right by him. He's a great athlete.
Yes.
He's got great speed. He's got great size. He's a great wide receiver. But how do you keep letting the same guy run right by you, over your head? And the Vol offense last night, as I said, I was there. I watched the entire game on the 50-yard line, 20 rows up. They were going tempo. That's what Heupel does. He doesn't get away from what he does. And they were going tempo. They were trying to keep the same Bama players on the field so that they could, create mismatches and get the matchups that they wanted, and it worked. But I was really impressed how they continued to run the football. Despite all their success throwing it, they never went away from the run. Jalen Wright had a good game. He had 12 carries for 71 yards, almost 6 yards a clip. Hendon Hooker ran the ball 14 times for 56 yards. And then Jabari Small, ran the ball 12 times for 53 yards and a touchdown. Now, after his fumble, he was not out on the field quite as much because that was a big play. And I think, potentially Coach Heupel lost a little bit of confidence in him. But they continued to run the football. I mean, 182 yards rushing. That's substantial when, you run the ball 39 times for 182 yards, almost 5 yards a carry, and they had 2 rushing touchdowns. So I give Coach Heupel a lot of credit for not only, keeping to his game plan, using tempo to his advantage, but also running the football to make sure that Bama had to honor the run. What did you think about the play selection, and what did you think about the Vols being able to outgain the Alabama team 182 to 114 on the ground?
Well, quite frankly, it was the mix-up of the pass to run, especially watching Hendon Hooker, who obviously has got legs, but he was very judicious when he ran. Like, it wasn't like a little bit of problems, I'm off and running. He was very controlled throughout that entire game. Now, I look back at that fumble with Small and Hooker, and I've seen the replay on that multiple times. I put that fumble more on Hooker. He should have committed. If he was going to hand it off, commit to it, because you could definitely tell he still had he was the last person to have his hands on the ball on that fumble on the way out. If he was going to give the ball to Small, he's got to commit to it much better than just right at the end, because that was a bad mistake that really could have changed the tempo of that game. It made it a 180 really quick, like we were talking before the show started.
Yeah, no, I figured that may have been the beginning of the end. Bama had climbed back, had tied the game up at that point, and then the fumble that was picked up and taken into the end zone. A lot of steam came out of that stadium at that point, and I just thought everybody and their sister sitting in the stands was like, "Oh, here we go again." How did we lose this momentum? How did we lose this lead? Because Tennessee was up big. I don't think some people didn't realize this, but in the first quarter, it was 21-7 Vols.
Yeah.
And it was all Vols. So, that kind of, that kind of swing to where, you have a couple of touchdown lead, and then all of a sudden, here we go. We're in the second half, late in the second half, and all of a sudden now we're losing. I thought, the team could have easily let the wind out of their sails, but they did not. Let's talk a little bit about Bama here. Bryce Young had a pretty decent game. I mean, 35 of 52, 455 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs, I thought, played really well. He had 3 scores on the ground. Honestly, I felt like Bama should have given him the ball more.
Especially in the fourth. Like,
that's what
honestly,
I'm talking about.
Yeah, he disappeared. I mean, there were 2 people that disappeared in the fourth quarter, and one was Jahmyr Gibbs, and 2 was Will Anderson.
I was gonna mention that too.
Honestly, I don't remember his name being called yesterday.
They said that he had 3 tackles, and they said that he had a half of a tackle for loss. But I was there, and I did not hear his name called over the intercom system once. I really didn't. Maybe it was so loud that I didn't hear it on those 3 tackles. But if he made 3 tackles, they were down the field, because I didn't see that half tackle, tackle for loss, and I certainly didn't see him sack the quarterback one time. I didn't see him really pressuring Hendon Hooker.
I didn't either.
And I think let's be honest, we've all said that Will Anderson Jr. is the best defensive player in college football. I've said that, and I've personally said that, and I would say I probably still believe that, but he got used and abused last night. I'm sorry. I mean, the tempo was a problem for him. They made it a point to scheme his direction, and it was smart, but I didn't see him really make anything. And honestly, I didn't see his counterpart, Dallas Turner, number 15. He had 2 tackles all game.
But he did more. Like, honestly, they were dropping him in the coverage, which I thought was weird. Like, there was one time he almost got a pick where it was kind of like, why are you taking your second best rush guy and dropping him to coverage? That'd be like Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick dropping Lawrence Taylor in the coverage. Why? I mean, both of those guys are kind of generational, downfield rushers. Why are you dropping them back in coverage? And last night was very confusing for me on how they defended Tennessee.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I didn't understand how neither one of those guys were able to make an impact. I mean, I really don't. Will Anderson has been a problem for blockers and for schemes all year long, no matter who they played. And I really thought the tempo disrupted his game. And I'm going to give the offensive line some credit. I mean, not only did they run for 182 yards, as I mentioned, but I mean, I think he was sacked one time?
Yeah, and honestly, he looked really confident in the pocket. I mean,
yeah, he was sacked one time. I just wanted to double check that. He was sacked one time all game, and he dropped back to pass, over 30 times. So when you're throwing the ball 30 times and you're sacked once, your offensive line is doing a pretty damn good job, especially when you've got the greatest player in college football coming after you. So I got to give credit all the way around. Coach Heupel deserves a lot of credit. This offense, of course, who's played great all year long, once again did it. But this is what I'm talking about. This is what separates Josh Heupel from the other coaches. And this is what separates this Tennessee team from last year's team. Last year's team was good, but they were overachieving. They were, winning some games maybe they shouldn't have won. And then they also lost a couple games they could have won. The Pittsburgh game last year, they were right in it, had a chance to win. There was a couple other games that they had a chance to win. This year, leading up to this Bama game, they won those games. And they, won games that were close. They won games that they could have potentially lost. And that just kept building the confidence until we got to where we were last night. And the team was like, hey, let's go. Let's ride, as Russ used to say when he was good. Let's ride and do this. And they did it. And it was the most amazing thing I've seen in college football in a long time, not only just from the team, but from the 100,000 people that were there, waiting for something like this to happen. This place, I've lived here now for a while. I lived in Columbus, Ohio for 20 years. I've lived here for 20 years. So I've gotten a taste of both the Big Ten and the SEC. But this place down here has been struggling for a long time to get back to where it used to be because, when I was a kid, if they didn't finish in the top 5, it was a bad season. Well, if they won 5 games the last 20 years, it was a looking up. So things have come full circle, and this team is right in the hunt. I got to be honest, I never really thought national championship this year for Tennessee coming into the season. But anything's possible now. I mean, they beat Alabama. Yeah. I mean, if you can beat Alabama, you can beat Nick Saban. I mean, why not? What do you think?
Well, I mean, now you got to look at that Tennessee game. I mean, the Georgia game. I mean, that game's got to be circled on the map. And quite frankly, it puts a little interesting tweak on everything because let's say Tennessee beats Georgia. And Tennessee and Alabama play for the SEC title, and Tennessee wins again. Do you think they're going to send 2 SEC teams to the Final Four? I don't know. I don't think they're going to. Alabama's out.
Yeah, I think they're going to send 2. I think they'll send 2 SEC teams. I mean, they've done it before.
Yeah.
I think if Tennessee beats Bama a second time, then Bama's done. There's no doubt about that. But, I think Georgia, if they have one loss, they could potentially get back in. This will all play itself out, as we go along. But November 5th, as we've got a commenter here, is going to be a big game.
Yeah.
And that's going to be down in Georgia. So they're not going to have the orange out behind them. But this team can travel, man. This offense can go anywhere. It's just, can their defense do enough? Last night, let's be honest, the defense wasn't great. I mean, they gave up a lot of points. I mean,
but you got to
52
look
to
at
49.
Bryce Young is a special quarterback. I mean, let's be honest. If Milroe was playing quarterback today, do you think this would have even been a 3-touchdown game?
Do I think that Bama would have scored 3 touchdowns, or
I think Tennessee would have won by 21 minimum.
I don't know about that. I think the game would have been a lot different. I think the amount of time that the Bama would have been on the field would have been even more as far as time of possession, because they would have been forced to run the football more. But I can say we don't have to. That's the thing, is that I didn't want Milroe to play, and then everybody to be like, well, if we'd have had our quarterback, because you saw last week after they almost lost to A&M, when they interviewed Coach Saban on the field, he was like, well, our quarterback wasn't out there. We didn't have our quarterback, and he mentioned that 3 or 4 times in the couple of second post game interview, and I was like, wow, What do you want? What do you want, buddy? Yeah, he didn't play. People get hurt all the time, but they had their quarterback last night, and honestly, he didn't look hurt to me.
No.
He took a bunch of big shots.
I'm shocked he survived.
He kept getting up. There was a few, especially down by the goal line there in the third quarter. He took a big shot, and I was like, "Ooh, that could be the end of him." But to his credit, he got up and he kept battling. But he didn't look injured to me. He threw the ball perfectly fine. Almost throughout the entire game. The quarterback was not the problem. I mean, they threw for 455 yards and he threw for 2 touchdowns. I got to ask you for a second about the receiving core for Alabama. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs is sick. That guy, I don't know how he ended up at Georgia Tech, because that guy is one of the best players. And I'm not just saying running backs. I mean, he can catch the ball too. He can run the ball. He can catch the ball. McClellan is kind of a breakout kind of guy. I don't understand why they don't use him more. I feel like he should have touched the ball more. But then you got, Brooks, you got Prentice, you got Burton, you got Latou. I don't know. I just don't feel like these guys are as good as some of the Alabama wide receivers we've seen in the past. Do you agree with me on that?
Agreed. I mean, their biggest problem right now is their best receivers. Like Burton just is not living up to expectations, but their best receivers like Prentice are young. I mean, they're freshmen and like one sophomore. And you get in a game like that, your eyes get really big and your arms get a lot shorter. You don't play like you usually want to play. And it's just the maturity aspect of it. And that was one of the things we talked about going into the year with this Alabama offense. It's like they don't have the maturity that they once did. They're going to be relying on a redshirt sophomore quarterback who did win the Heisman Trophy, and Jahmyr Gibbs, to really push them over the top.
Yeah. Well, the blueprint has been set for how to beat Bama. I mean, you saw A&M, give them a lot of trouble. And then you saw Tennessee, beat them and take them down and put up 52 points on them. And this is not the type of defense that we're used to seeing from Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide. I mean, I get it. Tennessee is hard to handle. There's been a lot of teams that have struggled to slow them down. They haven't been stopped a whole lot throughout the season. We're week 7 here. We've seen this. We've seen the Vols, move the football on every team they've played. But I thought Bama would give them more trouble. And, let's be honest, man. I mean, Jalen Hyatt, 6 catches, 207 yards, 5 touchdowns. That's a Tennessee all-time record. They've been playing football over in Tennessee down the road here for over 100 years, 150 years. They've been playing football. So, to have a guy who gets behind you 5 times and averages over 34 yards a catch, that's just not the secondary that I'm used to seeing. The Patrick Surtains, go back and look at all the great corners that have been at Alabama, all the great safeties, throughout the years. And I just didn't feel like this defense was Bama caliber. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, quite frankly, it's shocking as much as they brought back. how they really haven't taken that next step this year. And it's kind of alarming in some ways. But the one thing I will say about Nick Saban is he doesn't lose 2 games in a row. And I got to imagine this is going to be a rough week of practice in Tuscaloosa, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not counting Bama out of anything just yet. I think they'll, they're going to bounce back from this. They're going to not quit. They've lost games before and kept going. They play Mississippi State next week, so it's not. They better move on. They better have a rough week of practice. They better turn things around because they've got Mississippi State. They've got LSU, who's not good, but then they play Ole Miss. So they've got 2 of their next 3 games are going to be tests for them. And then, potentially if they can beat Ole Miss, they've got a chance to be, to still be in the SEC championship game. So they're by no means done. They lost by 3 points. They missed a field goal, I don't know if we mentioned, but they did have a chance to kick a field goal of their own. And looked like there was some confusion, and the guy did not even get it close. He missed a couple field goals last week. So I'm not sure if that dude got a ride home. I didn't see him get off the field. Maybe they let him, somebody helped him to the locker room, but they may have just left him out there in the melee with the 100,000 Vol fans down in the field smoking stogies. And
that's been Alabama's biggest problem is field goal kicking. I mean, Reichard's been one of their better field goal kickers during the Saban era, but holy crap. I mean, you go back and look at some of Alabama's losses, their field goal kicking. I mean, heck, the kick 6 against Auburn. I mean, there is plenty of examples where field goal kicking has been their downfall in their seasons too. So,
yeah, well, it was an amazing game. I've got to give Tennessee and Coach Heupel a lot of credit for the way that they believed that they could win, the confidence they had, the way that they came out of the locker room ready to play, and then just kept that same. It felt to me like they were just so well coached, and they were so they were so tuned in to what they needed to do to win this game. It didn't seem to really matter what happened from the opening kickoff to the final play. This team was just even keel throughout the entire thing. They kept believing, they kept doing what they were doing no matter what happened. And that to me falls a lot back on the head coach.
Well, last year, you could definitely tell this team was hoping to win. This year, you could definitely tell Josh Heupel's got this team believing they will win. And that is a big difference. When you have coaching staffs getting into that culture thought process of getting teams believing they will win. I mean, you could just see it in Hendon Hooker, just the way he was handling himself in the pocket. The game felt like it was slow to him yesterday. Like, no matter what the scenario was, you'd have to poke him to see if he was awake.
Yeah, he's definitely made the difference. I mean, that's the first thing you have to have in order to have a chance against a team like Alabama. And it's the first thing you have to have in order to win in college football. You have to have the right guy pulling the trigger back there. And they've got that. It took them a while to find him. They started off with Joe Milton last year as the starting quarterback, and they moved to Hendon Hooker after the Milton injury in the Pittsburgh game, and they've never looked back. And wow, thank God things happened as they did, because otherwise this guy may still have been on the bench and not gotten to play. So that was huge for them. But we're going to talk more about the effects of this game as we move along. But I think we'd be remiss if we didn't go in and also talk about the West Coast game that occurred last night. And, Utah, Johnny Utah, lots of teams, lots of people don't talk about old Johnny Utah too much. And after they lost the first week of the season against Florida, people are like, maybe overrated being a top 10 ranked team. And then, they came back and won a few games against some stinkers, and then they lost 42-32 to UCLA. People are like, how could they lose to UCLA? Well, UCLA's proven to be pretty good. And then last night, they came back and took down USC, who'd been gaining some momentum with their, wide open offense, Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams. Could they do it in year one? Well, apparently not, because Utah was able to go toe-to-toe with them offensively. Cameron Rising had a pretty good game, throwing for over 400 yards, 415, 2 touchdowns. Pretty amazing game also by the receiver, Dalton Kincaid. He had 16 catches for Utah, 234 yards and a touchdown. This is what me and you have talked about all year, though, that USC had the flash on offense. They had the skill guys, but did they really have the defense, to get them where they wanted to go? And both of me and you thought no. And last night, that's what it came down to. What did you think about this game in its totality? And what did you think about Coach Willingham going for 2 in the end?
Well, I mean, the one thing about Utah football, specifically under the Willingham era, is they always start off slow, and it's like a snowball going down a hill. It just keeps building up steam. And you just saw it once again last night. Now, talking about another guy who is overlooked, it's Cam Rising, the former Texas commit, played there, transfer out, went to Utah, and still wasn't even the guy right away. I mean, heck, Charlie Brewer was the first quarterback in 2021 for Utah and plays bad, and here comes Cam Rising. And as soon as he came back, look at him. I mean, the guy's numbers have been phenomenal in leading this team. Now, I will say Utah is not as strong in their secondary, but this is a team that comes to play. I mean, the only thing that shot me was last week against UCLA, where UCLA put their physical and imposed themselves on Utah. And Utah, that doesn't happen to Utah. Utah got back to playing Utah football yesterday and imposed themselves on SC, and it showed.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by the way that Utah's offense was able to move the ball on USC. Yeah. I mean, I really was. I thought that USC's defense had gotten better throughout the year. I thought they'd improved and had been, holding teams down a little bit. I mean, last week against Washington State, they held Cam Ward and the Cougars to 14 points and won a game 30-14. I thought they also, the defense really stepped up in that Oregon State game 3 weeks ago where they won 17-14. So the defense has actually had some games that you can point to and say, they're a little bit better than we thought they would be at this point in year one, especially the Oregon State game, holding them to 14 points, I thought was impressive. But, last night, wow, it was floodgates. I mean, we had the Tennessee game where, what were there? I can't remember if anybody punted all night.
I can't even think about it. I got to think about that.
I have to look it up. I was obviously there, but there was a lot going on around me.
Alabama,
there were some fights in the stands. There were some people falling down drunk. So, occasionally I'd have to look to my side to make sure I didn't get taken out by a punch or by somebody going down drunk. But, I don't recall anybody ever punting. And I rewatched this game when I got home. I don't think anybody punted in this game either.
I'm looking at the play-by-play because it's funny you mentioned that. I don't remember anyone punting either. I take that back. Alabama punted right away. Alabama punted a couple times in the first half.
Yeah. I mean, down the stretch, I don't recall anybody punting. And in this, in the USC game, I'm trying to recall if I saw a punt in this one either. I think Utah punted once and USC punted like 2 times. And so there's 3 punts in the entire game. And, that's the kind of football people want these days. And that's the football that they're getting, lots of offense. And, my question to you is, and what we need to really break down and tell people that are watching is, where does USC go from here? Can they still win the Pac-12? Does USC still have a chance? Or did Utah provide the blueprint on how to take them out?
You look at the rest of USC's schedule. I mean,
just so people know, they play Arizona next week, California, Colorado. Those 3 games are all victories. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
The big ones are going to be UCLA and Notre Dame to close the season.
I just don't see them being UCLA at the Rose Bowl. I really don't. I mean, if they're having problems with Utah's physicalness, I can't see how USC is going to be able to handle UCLA. And I still say there's another loss on this schedule. I mean, USC is relying too much on that offense to bail them out. I mean, there could be a shootout with Arizona playing Tucson. I mean, I could see that, but I don't see them losing to Cal or Colorado. Granted, congrats to Colorado for pulling off that overtime win yesterday against Cal.
Yeah, friend of the program, running backs coach Darian Hagan. We need to reach out to him today and give him what's up because, they lost their head coach, Carl Doral, getting fired a couple weeks ago, and the coaching staff was able to focus the boys and get a victory. So kudos to Coach Hagan and all the Buffaloes. Good for them. I'm very happy for Coach Hagan and the victory. I know he loves that program more than anything in the world. So I'm happy that they were able to win. But yeah, I see both of those last two games as problems for the USC defense. UCLA has just been lights out since the season began. They had a couple rough games in the first 2 weeks, and people were kind of questioning them. But since then, DTR and the boys have been rolling. So I see some problems with that game. And honestly, I see some problems with the Notre Dame game. I think Notre Dame has gotten a little bit better. I think Coach Freeman's gotten a little more comfortable. I think they've started to kind of find their identity. And I could see the USC defense struggling to stop, what is kind of a mediocre offense that Notre Dame has. But I think they've started to really use that running game, and I think that could be a problem for USC down the stretch. But I feel bad for Caleb Williams because wasn't really his fault they lost. He was 25 of 42, 381 yards, 5 touchdown passes, no picks, and then he ran 8 times for 57 yards, over 7 yards an average. So pretty good there. They still had their guys outside getting it done. Mario Williams, the transfer, had 4 catches for 145, and Jordan Addison, the other transfer, had 7 catches for 106. The
got
portal,
hurt.
Yeah, the portal is just crazy to me. I mean, think about this whole USC team. It's like portal built. You got Travis Dye, who was a transfer from Oregon, Caleb Williams, transfer from Oklahoma, Mario Williams, transfer from Oklahoma, Jordan Addison, transfer from Pittsburgh. This whole team has been built by the portal, and they've done a pretty good job. I think they get the portal award, them and Ole Miss.
Yeah.
So we'll give them credit for that. But let's move on and talk about a couple more games. Even though that one was pretty exciting, I think we need to also talk about Michigan and Penn State. Obviously, I have been critical of the Wolverines and their schedule because their schedule's been garbage. But they've played a team that has proven to be pretty decent squad thus far this year, and that's Penn State. And they played them at home, so I kind of figured they might have the upper hand. I did not think they were going to pistol whip them 41-17. What the hell happened to Penn State yesterday, and how in the world did they give up 418 yards on the ground? They should be ashamed of themselves, James Bonneville. How the hell do you give up 418 yards on the ground? J.J. McCarthy threw the ball 17 times for 145 yards and a pick, and they still put up 41 points. That's ridiculous, and James Franklin should be flogged today publicly for that defense.
I was blown away, to say the least, on that game. I mean, Penn State walked in with the 5th best rushing defense in the country, and Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards gashed them like nobody's business. Now, J.J. McCarthy honestly looked pretty predictable, and I think any DC with 2 cents can realize that if you're gonna beat them, you got to stop the run. And I think their game against Illinois could be pretty telling, because if he sits in the pocket, they're going to dink and dunk to the outside. But if he rolls to the right, that's when they're going to go deep. I mean, it's been very apparent watching J.J. McCarthy. It's just the problem is people have been having a hard time stopping Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. Granted, their schedule hasn't been exactly world beaters as of yet. It gets a lot tougher down the stretch. But Michigan, I'm not going to lie, they look good. But do I think at the end of the day they're going to be in the top 4? No. I don't. I see glaring holes that I think teams that can match up with them on the line of scrimmage can defeat them.
Yeah, I'm just still, I don't know, man. That blows me away. I thought that Michigan would probably win this game. I picked them to win because they were playing at home and because.
But not like this. I
but
mean,
not.
calling it 41-17 makes it sound close. This was really a 40-point game.
I don't know. I mean, I just think the entire defense should be stripped of their jerseys and have to earn them back this week at practice because they knew they were going to run the ball. Yeah. They knew that was coming at them. They knew that the handoff to Edwards or Corum was coming next, but they couldn't do anything to stop it. And, Sean Clifford, God bless him, he's not good, okay? I mean, I'm sorry. 7 of 19 yesterday for 120. How do you complete 7 passes throughout an entire football game, even when you're losing by 30 points? I mean, I don't get that. I don't understand. I think they need to go ahead and move to Drew Aller. I mean, see what you got there because they're not going to beat the Buckeyes with Sean Clifford at quarterback. I'm sorry.
No.
That's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And I think if Ryan Day was watching that game yesterday, he probably had to stay seated because he probably had a problem in his trousers because he was excited watching Michigan run for 418 yards on this Penn State defense. A week before the Buckeyes go up to what's it called, Happy Valley. No pun with the words there, but he definitely was happy to see that because I was a little bit worried about the Penn State game, but after watching that game, I am no longer am because that was a joke, and Michigan beat the crap out of them up at the line, and that was the reason that Michigan had such a good season last year was they were very good up front, and I thought they potentially would take a step backwards, losing some offensive linemen and obviously their 2 edge guys in Jabo and Hutchinson, but they've continued to push people around and get victories. So good for them. But I don't want to talk about them anymore, so we're not going to. Let's talk about the Oklahoma State TCU game. I picked Oklahoma State to win this one. I'm going to be up front and open about this. I mean, Oklahoma State has been rolling. And let's be honest, I mean, TCU knocked them off, but it took 2 overtimes to do it. I've got to be also honest that I did not have TCU in my preseason top 25. I did not. I don't think anybody did.
I think if you did, you should go to live in Vegas because you'd be making a lot more money right now. Because, I mean, quite frankly, if you even had them in the top half of the Big 12 at the beginning of the year, I would be shocked.
Well, they didn't even know they were going to start Max Duggan at quarterback themselves. There was a quarterback battle going on there. We were watching it pretty closely to try and figure out what was going to happen. Oklahoma State came out and scored 14 points pretty quickly. They were up 24-13 at halftime. I was thinking, okay, my pick looks pretty good. The Cowboys are rolling, looking good. And then things just kind of fell apart for them a little bit in the second half. Oklahoma State only scored 6 points in the entire second half. Now, they did put up 10 points in overtime, but in the second half, they only scored 6 points. James, tell me, what the hell happened? Did TCU make adjustments at halftime? I mean, how good is this coaching staff at TCU? I thought, Gary Patterson, the guy that built him a statue and then they fire him in the middle of the year. I was like, he's going to be hard to, replace him. But this coaching staff is doing a pretty good job.
I think there's 2 words you could say to the second half, and that's Spencer Sanders, who looked really good in the first half, but really bad in the second half. I mean, you look at his numbers as a whole, 16 of 36 for 245, 1 throwing touchdown, 2 running touchdowns, an interception. I'm sorry, you go 16 of 36, you're going to struggle. And it showed. I mean, TCU, they've got speed. I mean, if you watch any TCU football for the last 30 years, they've got speed galore. And Quentin Johnston is a freaking find down there. I mean, people knew about him going into the season, but once again, 8 receptions, 180 yards, a touchdown. This kid's fast. This kid's like another Jalen Reagor, the Turpin kid, Josh Doxson. You go down the line, they've always had these really fast receivers out on the edge, and it makes it hard to play them because you've got to play sideline to sideline against TCU.
Yeah, well, I was also impressed with their running back, Kendre Miller.
Mm-hmm.
He went 22 times for $104 and 2 touchdowns. Nobody was really talking about him preseason either. So give a lot of credit to this TCU program and to their coaching staff. 6-0 now in this season and 3-0 in the conference. TCU has a legitimate chance to win the Big 12. In fact,
absolutely.
I would say they're probably the favorites now. Think about them. They've taken down Kansas, who was undefeated at the time they played them. They took down Oklahoma 55-24 in a game that was worse than that, and they beat down the Oklahoma State in 2 overtimes. So I've got to start leaning towards TCU as my pick. Now they've got another rough game next week against Kansas State.
But they got him at home.
They got him at home. Do you see a letdown perchance in this one?
It could be, but honestly, if they're playing them up in Manhattan, I would be having a different conversation. I think the games this is going to sound weird, but the games I'd be more worried about right now are at West Virginia, which TCU never plays well at. I mean, name me a Big 12 team that does play well in West Virginia. I don't care who you are. It's tough to play there because it still doesn't even feel like it's part of the conference. And then you got at Texas and at Baylor. Yeah, and there's always been, I mean, granted, Gary Patterson's viewed at Texas as a homecoming game. Well, Gary Patterson isn't on the sidelines anymore. How does Sonny Dykes handle this? And granted, Sonny's a Texas guy. Like when he had the job at Cal, I never understood that because that guy had no cultural fit to Berkeley whatsoever. And
who does?
Yeah, I mean, I can't understand how he would coach there or just relate to recruits there because, I mean, heck, his dad was Spike Dykes. This is a guy that should be in Texas. And the best thing TCU did is when they hired him from SMU, I guarantee you, every single kid on that TCU roster, he recruited to SMU. He knew those kids. So the transition could not have been very difficult for him at all.
Oh, he's doing a phenomenal job, and that's the game that I point to on this TCU schedule. I think they'll handle Kansas State if they can. If they can neutralize Adrian Martinez and Deuce Vaughn. You know, I think they can, and they can outscore those two guys. Adrian Martinez and Deuce Vaughn have looked good. They got Kansas State up to number 17 ranking in the country. Kudos to them, but they still lost to Tulane. And you just can't erase that from my memory no matter what you do. And I feel like TCU can handle them as long as they don't have a letdown. But the big game to me is November 12th at Texas. If they can win that one, TCU is going to take this conference home and, can potentially vie for a spot in the college football playoff. As crazy as that is to say.
I know.
That's what we're looking at. I mean,
I
know. What the hell? It's nuts, but that is what we're looking at. Let's talk about another team that nobody really talked about in the preseason, including us. I'm not going to say that I knew this because I didn't, and that's Syracuse. And no one's talked about Syracuse all year. They're 6-0 now. They took out NC State yesterday. Now NC State did not have their quarterback. He was still banged up. They played Jack Chambers, who is not as good. But
what, the Charleston Southern transfer? Come on, Nate. Everybody knows about Charleston Southern from the FCS. I mean, come on.
The only reason I know where Charleston Southern is because I usually stay next to its campus when I'm waiting to get into the condo down in Charleston, and we stay in North Charleston. But other than that, I wouldn't know much about him. And this guy looked, overmatched yesterday. And Garrett Schrader this guy's, calmly getting it done. He did have 2 picks yesterday, but still 24-9 victory for Syracuse. Syracuse is 6-0. They're 3-0 in the conference. What the hell's going on up there, man? Did you have any inclination that Syracuse would be 6-0 at this point? And do they have a chance to win the ACC?
Well, next week's going to be key because they got to go to Clemson. But granted, Dino Ball has played well at Clemson for some time.
Yeah.
I mean, people forget about the time where Clemson came up to on a Friday night, came up to the Dome and lost to Syracuse.
I don't forget that.
I mean, the Carrier Dome is a very, very difficult place to play. It's a very small stadium and by the way, it's named after an air conditioning company with a stadium with no air conditioning. And the fans are on top of you. I mean, it is like there's maybe 8 yards that separate the fans from the actual field of play. It's hard to play there. And Syracuse is doing one hell of a job. But if they could, how they play against Clemson this weekend is going to dictate everything. But Sean Tucker and Schrader, phenomenal talent. Their defense looks infinitely better than it once did. I mean, that was one of the problems Syracuse had. It was their defense was just atrocious.
Yeah, well, we've got to remember that the Syracuse schedule is pretty back heavy. They've got to go to Clemson, then they've got to play Notre Dame at home, then they've got to travel to Pittsburgh, then they've got to play Florida State, then they've got to go to Wake. So they're by no means ready to be crowned the conference champion yet. But this was a big step for them. The win against Virginia 22-20 was huge. The victory over Purdue was big for them. They blew out Louisville 31-7 to start the season. So they have some decent victories, but the best is yet to come.
Hey, if you would have asked me at the beginning of the year, would Syracuse be bowl eligible? My guess, the answer would have been no. And we're not even to November yet, and Syracuse is bowl eligible. Kansas is bowl eligible. I mean, it's crazy. You look at the teams right now who you probably never even would have thought been even in the hunt are already bowl eligible.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that Syracuse might go to a bowl game, but I did not think they would start 6-0. So kudos to them and their coaching staff for getting it done. But as I mentioned, they've got some tough contests, and Clemson keeps let's go ahead and move to that game because they keep scraping by. They're not really blowing anybody out the way they've played this year. DJU has improved. He's making better decisions. He's not turning the ball over like he was. But let's just talk about Clemson for a minute. They're ranked, I believe, number 4. To start this week is what I'm talking about. They beat the crap out of Georgia Tech and Furman. Woohoo! They beat Louisiana Tech. Great. They struggled against Wake Forest. Could have easily lost that game. They beat NC State 30-20. They ripped off Boston College. And then yesterday, they played Florida State, and that was kind of anybody's game. They won 34-28, but Jordan Travis had a pretty decent game. And, the Tigers got all they wanted from the Seminoles. How good is Clemson right now in your eyes, James? And without that big run by Will Shipley, I don't know if they win this game. Where do you think they're at?
Honestly, I think Clemson's better than people give them credit for. I watched this game pretty close, and honestly, I look at the fourth quarter touchdowns. Clemson was just trying to put it on cruise control to end the game. I thought they looked – I mean, DJU looks worlds better than he did last year. Like, he looks more confident in the pocket. He doesn't look robotic. He looks like he's managing a game. But more importantly, Will Shipley, I think, is probably one of the most underrated talents in the country that people don't talk about because Clemson's offense just looked that bad, specifically their offensive line. Now, I will say, I think Clemson's D-backs have got to step up if they're going to really take a serious run at making the playoffs. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You look at their front four; it's probably the best in the country.
Huge game by Miles Murphy yesterday.
Yeah.
By the way, he had 2 sacks, 3.5 tackles for loss. You know me, ever since he was a freshman, and it started as a freshman in his first game, I've loved that guy, and it looks like even this year he's continued to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I look at Clemson, and it's just, if their D-backs still struggle, there's going to come a point where they're going to get exposed, because you cannot rely that much on really a generational defensive line. I mean, Breezy and Murphy are just that good.
Yeah, I agree. Now Breezy's been a little banged up. Did he play yesterday?
Yeah, he did.
I didn't see him tearing it up out there.
He was playing. Remember, this is something happened with his sister. I think she passed because Florida State did something where they honored her. And I'm not going to lie, it probably would be in my head too as well if I was in his situation. Kind of hard when you lose a family member like that. It's still going out and playing on Saturday. I mean, testament to his brothers, how he's taken time to do that, and how much he means to them. But honestly, you look at him, I still say he's a top 10 draft pick going in the next year. I mean, this kid's got a motor like nobody's business.
No, he's a good D lineman. Their D line has been known to be dominant over the past 10, 15 years. So
I mean, that's probably been the strength of Dabo at Clemson, is really not only having one guy at their D line, they've had like multiple guys constantly throughout that tenure of his term there in Clemson.
Yeah, and I've been critical about Will Levis and the quarterback at Kentucky. I keep hearing how he's a first-round pick and how great he is. Well, let's be honest. Kentucky was able to go down and take out Mississippi State yesterday at home, 27-17. But honestly, it didn't have a whole lot to do with Will Levis. This game was solely based on my player of the day's shoulders, and that's Chris Rodriguez Jr. You know, he missed the first 4 games of the year with a suspension. Took him a few games to get rolling, but he was rolling yesterday. 30 carries, 196 yards, 2 touchdowns. He just kind of ran over that Mississippi State defense and got Kentucky a pretty nice win. Mississippi State, man, they'll look great one week and win a big game, and then the next week they kind of fail to show up.
And crap their pants.
Crap their pants. I mean, 2 weeks in a row, they beat Texas A&M. They beat Arkansas and put up 40 points in both games. And then they get held to 17 against Kentucky. Kind of disappointing performance, if you ask me.
Well, the one thing I will give Kentucky credit on is their offensive line as being a steaming pile of dung all year, which is weird because that's been Mark Stoops' basically claim to fame. Their offensive line looked phenomenal yesterday. I mean, quite frankly, I don't know what the O-line coach got in their head with, but because they looked much better than they have all year long. And that was the difference in the game. But now Mississippi State's got Bama next week. Maybe they were looking ahead, but if you don't take care of business this week, who cares about next week?
Yeah, no, it was a big loss for them moving forward. And I want to talk before we get out here about the Ole Miss Auburn game. Auburn's probably about 30 minutes away from firing their coach again, which, why, I don't know. They just
ends in why.
Yeah, they just didn't like that guy from the beginning, and they've been like begging to fire Harsin since it started. But let's talk about Lane Kiffin for a minute. This guy is pass happy Lane-O over there, and yesterday he throws the ball, completes 9 passes and still scores 48 points. I mean, they had 3 guys that had over 100 yards. How in the hell? We talk about Penn State. Well, how about Auburn giving up 448 yards on the ground to Ole Miss? Judkins, the boy we talked about, the transfer, he ran for 139. Zach Evans, the other transfer, ran for 136. Jackson Dart, the other transfer, ran for 115. And then Dayton Wade, their third string running back, had 4 carries for 63 yards. So they had 3 guys that had over 100 yards rushing. James, when is the last time you recall a team have 3 guys have 100 yards rushing?
Oh, I could tell you a time. I could tell you a program, and more importantly, hold on a second here. my screen all of a sudden wants me to show highlights. Let's think about where Lane Kiffin was born, and that was Lincoln, Nebraska. People forget his dad was Tom Osborne's D coordinator in the early years in Nebraska. And Nebraska had many times where they had 3 guys run for over 100 yards in one game. And you look at these stats, 69 carries for 448 yards. I mean, if that isn't Tom Osborne, I don't know what is. And it's making me more impressed by Lane Kiffin by the second, because if he's got to be pass happy, he'll be pass happy. If he's got to run the ball, he'll run the ball. He's going to manufacture a way to win games based on his strengths. And I thought really going into the season, he was going to throw the ball all over the place. Well, now we can see, I mean, when you run for over almost 70 carries in one game, he doesn't care how he's going to get there, but he's just going to get there.
Yeah, and I mentioned that Jackson Dart only threw it 9, completed 9 passes. Well, 3 of them were touchdowns.
Yeah.
So, I just don't remember him running like this when he played for USC. I don't remember him running the ball barely at all. And yesterday he had 14 carries, as I mentioned, for 115 yards. That's over 8 yards a clip. That's pretty impressive. So great job by the Lane train. Tank Bigsby had a big game, 20 carries, 179 yards, 2 touchdowns in the defeat. But Auburn just does not have a quarterback. That Robbie Ashford, 2 interceptions, only completed 8. You talk about Jackson Dart only completing 9. Robbie Ashford only completed 8. So you had the Tennessee game where you had 100 something completions, and then in this game we had 17 completions by both quarterbacks.
By the way,
kind of a flip.
Is Zach Calzada on any milk cartons down there for being missing? You remember how they used to put missing children on milk cartons? Is he on any milk cartons down there? Because is he even playing for Auburn anymore? Because I don't know how bad he must be to not even get on the field at Auburn.
They said he had some injury, and that's why he wasn't playing, but I have no idea what's going on. But we'll see. We could have Carnell Cadillac Williams be named the interim coach today, so we'll have to keep our eyes open for that. Before we go, give me your top 5 right now.
Ohio State, Tennessee, Georgia, Clemson, Bama.
I'm with you. I'm right there with you. I agree with you. Those are my 5 in that order. So we'll see what the voters think, but I'm with you. That's
you know what the voters are going to do. You and I both know they're going to take the first place votes. They're going to give some to Tennessee, some will go to Georgia, none will go to Ohio State.
Yeah, Ohio State will probably go backwards on their bye week.
Exactly.
I wouldn't be shocked, but
heck, how is Kentucky still ranked? How is LSU even smelling the top 25?
I don't know. They shouldn't have been ranked last week, but they were, and that just makes Tennessee look better because they were actually LSU, who they shouldn't have been, but they were ranked 24 when they played. So that gives the Vols some more credibility. But, hey, kudos to the Vols. Great game yesterday. Big victory. 15 years they've been waiting. 15 years they've been waiting to beat Alabama. So congratulations to them.
The Cigar Association, American Cigar Association's got to be happy as a clam because they probably sold more cigars yesterday after that game than they probably have in some time. So,
hey, people bought them. Hey, give the ball fans credit. They bought them before the game because they were firing up in the stands. So they had them long before the game was over because once the victory bell rang, they were sparking them up. So,
by the way, were there any mustard bottles or golf balls that you saw while you were at the game?
I did not.
Not being thrown, but in people's hands at any given point.
I did not see any, but I saw some pretty crazy shit. That's for sure. So hopefully week 8 will be as good as week 7 because this was an awesome week of college football and some great games yesterday, and I hope it continues.
Well, you got 5 teams that are ranked on rank next week, so it's going to be fun.
Yep. I'll be looking forward to it. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. Come back next week. Watch Man Coverage again. Follow us on Twitter at man_coverage and check us out on YouTube. James, have a great week. I'll talk to you real soon, buddy.
Hey, we'll see you then.